Hey, Margie here. The health of our gut is so important to the health of our bones. I always say happy bones create a happy life, but the truth is a happy gut creates happy bones. So today we're going to focus on a happy gut. And our special guest is Dr. Vincent Pedre. And Dr. Pedre is the medical director of Pedre Integrative Health and the founder of Dr. Pedre Wellness. He's the CEO and founder of Happy Gut Life LLC and has worked as a nutraceutical consultant and spokesperson for NatureMD and is a functional medicine certified practitioner with a concierge practice in New York City since 2004. He believes the gut is the gateway to excellent wellness. His newest book, The GutSMART Protocol, features a 14-day personalized gut healing plan based on GutSMART Quiz, and it's the accumulation of years of research and clinical experience as a functional gut health expert. And today, that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at how the gut, how you can take care of your gut and how that impacts our bones. This talk is full of so much wonderful information and steps that we can all take to improve the health of our gut, which will improve our bones as well as our overall health and well-being as well. So lots of great information. Stay tuned. Welcome, Dr. Pedre. I'm really happy to have you here on the podcast. This is such an important topic. And with anything with bone issues, I think anything with all issues, the gut is critical. But this population, it's extremely important. I love the work you do. So welcome.
Thanks for having me. I gotta say that I've paid attention to a lot of the interrelationships between gut health and the body, but I haven't paid too much attention to the effects or the connections between gut health, the gut microbiome, and bone health as much as I have other things. And I want to thank you for having me on because I sat down and I did research on this topic, and I was amazed at how much we know and also how many things we still don't quite know for certain. But I think even just from what we know, there's a lot that we can learn and even just practical tips and advice that people will be able to take away from this um, podcast.
For me, I've been working with people with osteoporosis for over 25 years, and it's unbelievable the connection. And a lot of people, will start looking at their body because they have this diagnosis of osteoporosis or osteopenia. And they've had all sorts of gut issues their whole lives, but people just feel they have to live with, oh, a little bloating, no big deal. Oh, a little
Yeah.
constipation, no big deal. But as you and I both know, it's a huge deal. And what's fun is when they start working things that improve their bones and they address this, all sorts of symptoms get better and their life becomes so much more miraculous. So it's such a big deal. And I'm excited because I think people listening are going to really, even if you get one tip today, that it can just really make a big difference in your life. So I always love to hear the backstory. And I think your story is quite interesting. So why don't you just tell us how you got into specializing in gut health? And I just have to say before that, we're on the same wavelength because all my programs are Happy Bones, Happy Life, and your programs are Happy Gut.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and
And
yeah,
now GutSMART with the new book, the GutSMART Protocol. I just want to highlight what you just said about, writing off symptoms like a little bit of bloating, a little bit of constipation. And I think a lot of people think, or a lot of times people think that the intensity of their symptoms is indicative of the severity of their condition. And the thing that I've learned from taking care of gut patients for now, you know, 20 years of being a doctor, but really over a decade as a functional medicine practitioner, is that the severity of gut symptoms doesn't always tell you the severity of what's actually going on inside the gut. And it can actually be really misleading because I've had a lot of patients over the years who had very minimal symptoms, gut centric symptoms, as I call them, but they had a lot of gut related symptoms, including joint aches, joint pain, osteoarthritis, things that we wouldn't relate to gut health, but are actually integrally connected to gut health. And so for me, it actually dates all the way back to childhood. I just remember having some really severe stomach aches My mom had all varieties of home remedies that she would give me, some of them prescriptions, some of them over the counter, sometimes laxatives, sometimes antidiarrheals, sometimes antispasmodics, because I suffered a lot from my gut. And things didn't get better as I entered my teenage years because I would get sick. My parents would take me to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician would prescribe antibiotics. Then I would get sick a second time in the same year, back to the pediatrician, antibiotics. And we kept repeating this cycle 2 to 3 times per year. And it basically just wiped out my gut microbiome. Now, back then, this is the 80s. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know what's going on. Why was my immune system not functioning? Well, 80% of the immune system is all along the gut lining. It's the biggest presence of the immune system, and it's affected by the makeup of your gut microbiome. And if you don't have enough good probiotic bacteria, it's going to mess up your immune signaling. And that's what was happening with me. And I was predisposed to getting all sorts of respiratory infections, upper respiratory, sinus, bronchitis, throat, everything, you name it. I was the hypochondriac child that was afraid to be around sick people because I thought that I would get sick every time. And little did I know that not only had the antibiotics wiped out my gut microbiome, but they had basically left me with leaky gut. And as a result, I was poisoning myself with things like cereal with milk for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, lots of bread, ice cream after dinner, a vanilla milkshake on the way home from school every day. That was our routine. My mom would pick me up from school, and on the way home from school, we would stop at, I think it was either Burger King or McDonald's, and get a vanilla milkshake. And no wonder that I just kept getting sick over and over. And I didn't realize that, I was basically eating all the wrong foods. And there was no education about like what proper diet was. And back then we really didn't understand, there was such a strong campaign from the dairy industry about how milk, it does the body good, and it's builds strong bones. So you should get a lot of milk. And so milk was a very present part of my diet growing up, along with wheat, gluten. And it wasn't until I got to medical school where, just out of practicality, I stopped having milk as often because I couldn't stop and eat cereal with milk, which was the main way that I would get milk. And, sometimes there was cream in coffee and things, but I didn't really drink a lot of coffee. So my milk intake dropped. And even though I was in a Western medical school, there was not a lot of nutrition. I did grow up in a household where my dad was kind of interested in nutrition. He was dabbling in it. He had done actually food allergy testing back in the 80s and had found a whole list of foods that he couldn't eat. And he put it up on the fridge. And, it was just, as kids, we made fun of it because we thought this is ridiculous. Like, you have all these foods now, like you can't eat mango and you can't eat this, that. But some of it filtered in, and somewhere in there, I felt that there's gotta be a diet connection. And as a medical student, we're always, you know yourself best, but you're in medical school, so you're really curious about all the things. You start learning all these health things. And so I was paying really close attention. And the first thing I noticed when I stopped having dairy as much in my first year of medical school is that I didn't get sick when my colleagues were sick. And, I still got sick, but it just wasn't as easy as before. And so I was paying attention. I thought, well, what changed? I'm not eating as much dairy. I started having, at about that time, I started shifting my diet and incorporating more healthy fats. So I was getting olive oil. I was cooking at home. I was incorporating avocados. So there was a shift in the way I was eating. And I paid close attention. And I was always curious about how the diet affects us. But honestly, I didn't understand what had happened until I discovered functional medicine and started learning about the gut microbiome, the effects of antibiotics on the gut microbiome, on almost like this hidden world inside of us that we don't even know exists, that we haven't realized how important it was. And really, it's in the last 20 years where the research on the gut microbiome is really starting to explode. Even though if you look at naturopathic medicine at the turn of the 19th century, it was already focused on gut health and the importance of the gut. And honestly, when I was in medical school and heard the term leaky gut, I thought, that sounds like ridiculous. Like, how can your gut be leaky? Like, maybe if you have sepsis, your gut will be leaky when you have an overwhelming bacterial infection. But the idea that your gut becomes leaky, like that sounded to me like some sort of sci-fi made up condition. And so I was kind of like teetering, between my training as a traditional Western doctor, but my curiosity and interest in looking beyond that, because I was always really interested in root cause medicine. And even before I went to medical school, I actually had discovered meditation and breath work through the fact that I was looking for a solution for my fear of needles, because I almost decided not to become a doctor because I was afraid of needles. I'm like, well, if I'm afraid of needles, how am I going to become a doctor? I can't be in the same room with needles. Like, how? That's not compatible. And yet, there was such a fascination and interest in the science and in helping people. And of course, my parents, give me a little kick in the butt to keep going, because I did tell them right after I took the MCATs for medical school that, "Yeah, I don't know about this medical school thing. I'm afraid of needles and I don't know if I can do this." Well, it was the elephant in the room, and I had gotten into medical school. I got a scholarship to University of Miami, and I took actually 8 months off before medical school. I finished college early, and I was sitting at home, and I'm thinking, I need to figure out what's going on here. Why do I break out into cold sweat? My heart starts racing, and next thing I know, the room is turning black, and then I'm waking up on the floor, or falling back on the bed. And I discovered the fight or flight. I discovered the autonomic nervous system, and I found a book that taught you how you could gain access to what seemed out of our control through the breath. And I was so determined to figure this out that I started doing breath work and then meditation and then yoga. And I was reading books by Deepak Chopra, by Andrew Weil. And so by the time I got to medical school, my mind was so open by all the reading, not just the reading, but my own personal experience actually shifting. I was basically rewiring my brain, and little did I know that this was going to play such a significant role, not only in the type of doctor I became, but later on now in understanding the importance of the gut brain connection and so many other interconnections that play a really important role in our gut health, and then consequently in the health of the rest of the body.
Wow, I love this whole story on so many levels. And my story is so similar in that, in terms of realizing I wasn't practicing what I preach and getting very into meditation and breath work and completely, and also getting rid of dairy and getting off all my thyroid medications. I have Hashimoto's, and seeing so many things in the evolution of where you are today. But what's so incredible is now you've used that in the work you do and you teach that, and it's such a big part. So often people think, all right, what am I going to do? I have these stomach issues, and there's so many different things, but this piece to it, the figuring out strategies to, we're not going to get rid of the stress in our life. The world is stressful, but figuring out what practices you can do. And I know that's a big part of what you teach, and it's so powerful. As you said, look how your life changed. So I love that, pay it forward, learn it for yourself, and now you're helping the world with that. So before we get into, I want to really get into the bone, but I just know you wrote a second book. I mean, I have the book here. Just explain, because your first book, Happy Gut, is fabulous. So why did you decide you needed to do the Happy Gut Protocol? What was
The
it that
GutSMART. Yeah, the
yeah.
GutSMART protocol. Uh, a big reason is that the science is evolving so quickly. And since I wrote Happy Gut back in 2014, so much has evolved in our understanding of the gut microbiome and the interconnections that just for that reason alone, just an update on the science and the understanding, I felt it was really important to write a second book. I also wanted to kind of take what I had done in the first book, and it was a supplement based program, 28 days. It's a lot. 28 days doesn't sound long, but it is long for a lot of people. And I wanted to come up with a simplified protocol that was all food based. So it's easy for people to do no matter what part of the world you're in. And I also wanted to personalize it because what I had realized working with gut patients over so many years is that no two gut patients are the same. So how can their diets be the same? And there's so many prescriptive health books out there that are one size fits all. The truth is, there's no one size fits all when it comes to diet. So I wanted to create a quiz that would divide people into their gut type, so mild, moderate, or severe dysfunction. And then based on that, then you can know what foods are in, what foods are out. Now, there's certain general guidelines, of course, that are true for everyone. Like you should try to eat organic when possible, avoid GMOs, avoid gluten, limit dairy, depends on what your gut type is and the type of dairy. There's certain dairies that you might be able to have when your gut type is mild. But overall, I wanted to solve the problem that I heard over and over. I don't know what to eat. What should I eat for my gut? And it's the answer is not the same if you're mild, moderate, or severe. So I wanted to create a personalized program, and mine is one of the first that I've ever seen that does that. And I think it's going to be a big game changer because I think after having a book that's personalized, how can you come out and say a one size fits all? Because it never works for everyone. It just doesn't. And I also wanted to incorporate more of the mind body gut connection. And, because you can't out diet or out supplement a stressed out lifestyle. And what I've learned since so many years of taking care of gut patients, you can check all the boxes off. Like you're doing perfect diet, you're doing everything just right. And yet you're like this. You're this type A person. You're running from meeting to meeting. You're like inhaling your salad at lunch. And your body is a stress ball and it's absorbing all of that stress. Your vagus nerve becomes dysfunctional. You lose vagal tone, which is kind of like the main superhighway for the parasympathetic nervous system that controls digestion, gut motility, production of stomach acid, gut permeability. So I realized this is a really important part of the protocol. And I wanted to include a whole section, but I wanted to bring in the science too. Like why the vagus nerve and what's the science and what are the studies showing? Because I really want to convince people that this isn't hokey pokey, that this is true science that is shown. Meditation, breath work is a key part of healing the gut. And when you heal the gut and you improve your gut microbiome, then you heal the rest of your body. So I wanted to incorporate all these pieces into this book. It was very ambitious because even just teaming up with a chef and segmenting recipes so that recipes qualify some for severe, some for moderate, some for mild. It is quite challenging because you have to cross check all the ingredients and make sure that you don't put something in a severe recipe that someone in severe can have. For example, you may hear that fermented foods are good for you and read an article that says, incorporate more fermented foods. Fermented foods make for a better gut health. And you think, I'm going to just start incorporating a bunch of fermented foods. But then you suddenly start feeling sick and you get really bloated. And maybe you get histamine issues. Maybe you're histamine sensitive and fermented foods have histamine. Well, if you took the GutSMART quiz, you probably would come out in the severe category. And if you're severe, you can't have ferment just yet. You've got to wait. You've got to do some gut healing first. So even something that seems good for your gut might not be good for you just yet. And that's the thing that, as a gut health, functional gut expert over the years, I got those patients who came in and they're eating so healthy and yet they're feeling so horrible. And so I learned a lot from them about, quote unquote healthy diets, and yet they might not be the right diet for you in that moment. Maybe you're eating too many raw vegetables, but your gut microbiome is so messed up that your body can't break down and assimilate those types of carbohydrates. So you've got to start cooking your vegetables first. You've got to roast, cook your vegetables, make them easier to digest, heal your gut, improve your gut microbiome, and then little by little you can get to the point where you can incorporate salads in your diet. But that was the motivation. And really, I think I've learned so much since my first book that I wanted to share with people and create a practical program. It's 14 days long. You take the quiz at the beginning, you take the quiz at the end, and it gives you a quick win. And there's a lot more lessons inside the book, a lot more about learning about the gut. And my goal is to empower people, because knowledge is power and understanding your body better is power. And for me, I'm looking at everything through the lens of the gut and the gut microbiome, which is a new lens that we're looking at health through that we haven't looked at for hundreds of years.
And the good news is when we look at it through this lens, it's amazing what can happen. I mean, there's so many things I love that you said. I love the fact that bioindividuality, each person is different. And I see a lot of people with small intestine bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, and there's no way they could start exactly what you said. They
You
start
can't
eating
have ferments.
they start eating fermented food and they are just miserable. And so sometimes their friend says, or they listen to a talk, you should do this. So I think that's so wonderful that you've individualized it and really helped people figure out what track they could start on. And then the other piece about the stress, that's just, what the exciting thing to everyone listening is that when you incorporate these practices, life changes. You're just a happier person and every single thing becomes miraculous, really more miraculous. So in a way, having this gut issue or whatever issue where with your bones brings you to start learning these things, you look back and it really was a blessing in disguise. So I think it's
I
exciting that
agree.
all these people can get so much benefit from your book. And you're giving us, there's a
The-
free chapter. We'll give the link later on that everybody can just see what this is about and get started. So because it hasn't come out yet, it will be out pretty soon. But what is it, April
There,
4th?
there's
What's the day it's actually coming
April
out?
4th is
April
when it
4th.
goes,
Yeah.
when it either delivers or will soon thereafter. If there's so many takeaways, I'm sure people are listening, hopefully taking notes as they listen. But if there's one thing that I want people to remember from today, I mean, there'll be many things, but one important thing is that stress is like an attack on your gut. And stress can come in the form of mental stress, but it also comes in the form of what I call biophysical stress. It's the stress that your body feels when you don't get enough sleep, when you're running yourself ragged, like you're running from here, there, everywhere. You're not giving yourself time for rest and relaxation. That is biophysical stress. Even though, we live in New York and New York region, right? You're in New Jersey. And I've had many patients over the years who are handling their plates are like overloaded. And yet they'll tell me, well, I'm not stressed. I'm like, you're not stressed because you've become desensitized mentally to the stress. But your body is freaking out. And really one of my goals is to help people become their own body whisperers to understand the signals that their bodies are giving them. Because a lot of times, like you said at the very beginning, people will start thinking that the bloating is normal, that feeling this way is normal, and you just start writing it off. And you think, well, this is just the way things are going to be. I'm getting older. You chalk it up to age. People have told me this is just part of aging. It doesn't have to be part of aging, and it doesn't have to be part of your normal. These are things that actually can be fixed and are reversible. And that's what really, I think, um, fascinates me about gut health issues.
Oh, me too. I mean, I teach happiness, and that's like based with, which also goes with stress reduction. And I found I was working with people with chronic pain that when they started learning these habits, practicing different things to improve relaxation, chronic pain, it was totally different than just working just regular physical therapy. It was amazing. I mean, I found this out over 35 years ago. So it's so powerful. So let's now go to the bones because there's such a relationship between the gut, inflammation, and bone health. And why is this something that really every person needs to look at their gut and not? And the other thing you mentioned that is so important is what I see is many people just are so disassociated with their body that they don't even feel the symptoms because they're so busy multitasking that they don't even tune in. And you said something earlier about really being aware of your body and because you can get messages and those messages can be life-saving and really change the whole quality of your life. So let's go back to the bones and inflammation.
Yeah. And the gut. As I was preparing for this, I was thinking about the China study and how, they looked at dietary patterns around the world. And they found that in parts of the world where they ate much higher volume of vegetables and not a lot of dairy, that they had less likelihood of osteoporosis than in the Western world where there was a lot of dairy and maybe not as many vegetables. And I was thinking, that's really interesting. They were looking at it from the point of view of the acid-base balance, but they weren't looking at it from the point of view of the gut microbiome, and that these vegetables actually act as prebiotics. And one of the things that we know is that prebiotic supplements like inulin, they've done this in studies, can increase calcium absorption. But they also, so prebiotics are like fish food. They feed our gut microbiome. If you have a lot of good bugs in there, they're going to feed the good bugs. And so when the gut microbiome, like lactobacillus and bifidobacteria, take in those prebiotic nutrients, they actually help create certain things like short chain fatty acids, like butyrate. And this is the part that's really interesting because it starts getting really complex and integrated because short chain fatty acids regulate your immune response, and the immune system plays a key role in bone formation and bone breakdown. So the balance between Th17 and T regulatory cells, whether you're more on the inflammatory side or more on the anti-inflammatory side. Obviously, when you're more on the anti-inflammatory side, you're gonna retain more bone. And so they regulate osteocyte metabolism and bone mass. Now, mice are not humans, but if we look at studies done with mice, mice fed short chain fatty acids. So these are the postbiotic nutrients created by our probiotic bacteria when they feed on prebiotics. Prebiotics are things like dark leafy greens, bananas, blueberries, Jerusalem artichoke, dandelion, so common foods, onions, garlic, these are all rich in prebiotic nutrients. So when mice are fed short chain fatty acids along with a fiber rich diet, their bone mass increases. Now, this was an interesting study because they decided to give mice antibiotics and then see what happens. And the antibiotics reduce the short chain fatty acid production, and it then affects bone mass. But then if you take those post antibiotic mice and then you feed them these short chain fatty acids, and by the way, the best way to get these short chain fatty acids is you've got your own little short chain fatty acid factories inside your gut. And these short chain fatty acids like butyrate are super anti-inflammatory. You feed them good foods. And I'll talk about that. Like, what is the best diet for gut health? What's gonna really help move the needle? Well, there's another hormone or a signaling molecule called insulin-like growth factor, and IGF-1 that has a big influence on bone mass as well. So they found that in these post-antibiotic mice, when they gave them the short-chain fatty acids, it increased the production of IGF-1, which then affected bone mass favorably. Now, okay, so this is this is just really fascinating to me because we're looking at things through a different lens. It's like if you don't ask the question, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It just means you never asked the question, so you never bothered looking there. They looked at what happens if you feed mice a high-fat diet, and they found that a high-fat diet will reduce bone mass because of through PPAR gamma 2 activation, which then leads to impaired osteoblasts. So you lose bone mass. Now, what happens if you take mice who have been fed a high-fat diet, have reduced bone mass, and you take their stool, their feces, and you transfer it to healthy mice that have normal bone mass? Guess what happened?
They lost some bone.
They lost bone. So wait a second. You're telling me that by transferring the microbiome from mice that is causing bone loss to a microbiome of mice who don't have bone loss, when they acquire that microbiome, they start losing bone mass? So it it could actually be controlled by a gut microbiome. Well, we also know that when you have healthy bacteria in there, the lactobacillus bifidobacteria, that they produce vitamins, right? They produce B12, but they also produce vitamin K2. K2 is super important for maintaining bone mass. And actually, I'm sure you've talked about this plenty in your podcast, how they've done studies in Japan on supplementing with vitamin K2, and they find that it reduces the risk of osteoporotic fracture. So you need these little short chain fatty acid and vitamin producing factories to be happy inside your gut. So the studies are clear that high fiber foods will help increase calcium absorption. And then they promote the growth of lactobacilli and bifidobacteria, two very important um, genesis of bacteria inside the gut. And these bacteria actually also increase mineral absorption. So you absorb more calcium, more magnesium, more phosphorus, and thus they're affecting bone mass because bone is mostly made up of calcium. But they're also doing it by modulating the immune response. And it's interesting because they found that there is a very similar immune component between osteoporosis and inflammatory joint diseases like rheumatoid arthritis. They have a very common thread. And other inflammatory diseases like Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune disease, inflammatory disease of the bowel, that if you approach it from the Western medical model, we think it's the immune system gone haywire, and the treatment is putting people on, you know, immunosuppressive biologics. And Crohn's leads to severe bone loss over time. Interestingly, when you start looking at the microbiome of patients with Crohn's disease, you might find a parasite, you might find yeast overgrowth. So if you treat the underlying root cause, you can actually reverse the Crohn's disease, improve the health of the gut, improve bone absorption. And a lot of it has to do with microbial diversity. Microbial diversity, again, ties back to IGF-1 and its influence on bone mass, because it seems like the more diverse your microbiome is, the more that it helps promote the secretion of this IGF-1 that helps improve bone mass through the production of short chain fatty acids. And so when I was researching my book and looking at what is the best diet for gut health, like, and really, what are we looking for? the holy grail of gut health is diversity. So you want microbial diversity. If you have reduced diversity, which happens through taking too many antibiotics, taking even over-the-counter pain meds. How many people with osteoporosis also have joint pains and are taking ibuprofen, or even were told by their doctor to take acetaminophen because it won't damage their stomach lining the same way that ibuprofen will. And, so a lot of people with osteoporosis will have probably osteoarthritis too, another inflammatory condition of the bone. Well, it turns out that NSAIDs increase gut permeability. So it's going to increase inflammation. It's going to increase immune activation, which is then going to impair bone formation. So it affects the osteoblast and the osteoclast. But secondarily, acetaminophen affects the gut microbiome. Wait a second, what? It can actually affect the makeup of the gut microbiome. It causes a dysbiosis, an imbalance between good and bad bugs. Once you have a dysbiosis, then the mechanisms are in place. It's like a domino effect for leaky gut to develop. And once you get leaky gut, you get immune overactivation, and you get all the consequences, including the effects on bone mass. So you want microbial diversity, and I will probably bet that 99% of the people walking on this planet who live in the Western world have some element of compromised microbial diversity because of so many things they've been exposed to, from antibiotics to over-the-counter medications. Even birth control pill increases gut permeability. So we need to figure out, how do we restore microbial diversity, which is also going to help protect your bone mass? And while I was looking into this, I found a study that was done at Stanford University. Now, it was a small study. It ended up being 18 people per arm. About 73% of them were women. And so it wasn't the most diverse group, but still, it was the first study. They didn't have a control group, but they had one group eating high fiber diet, and that was anywhere between like 6 to 8 servings of fiber rich vegetables per day. And then they had another group that was eating a high fermented foods diet. And they looked at things like gut microbiome at baseline through shotgun genome sequencing, as well as 19 inflammatory markers. They looked at even innate immune system activation through cytokine cell activation. They looked at all different ways that the immune system might get activated. And this was really surprising. This is probably one of the most surprising things I discovered while I was researching for my book. Because in functional medicine, we learn, eat the rainbow, right? And that eating the rainbow will increase gut microbial diversity. But what they found in this study, and by the way, the high fermented foods group was eating up to 6 servings of ferments per day, mostly in the form of yogurt or vegetable brine. Vegetable brine is a very easy ferment that you can actually get recipes online and you can make at home in a mason jar with cheesecloth on top. It's in just a couple of days, you've got some vegetable brine that you can start drinking. Again, you need to know your gut type to make sure that it's okay. And they didn't go from eating the pre-test, they were only having about 0.4 cups of ferments per day. And they did a ramp up over 4 weeks. So they didn't go from 0.4 to 6 immediately. They slowly ramped it up. And they did get some bloating in the beginning, but by the end of the study, they were not feeling bloated anymore. And so what they found was that microbial diversity was actually increased by the high fermented foods diet and not by the fiber-rich diet. However, the fiber-rich group showed immune modulation that was dependent on their baseline microbial diversity, and they divided that group into 3 groups based on their diversity, like mild, medium, and high diversity. And what they found was, or low, and that the group with the high microbial diversity had the best immune modulation where it reduced inflammation, whereas the group with the lowest diversity actually did not have a change in immune activation from the high fiber diet. But the high fermented foods group showed a trend towards increasing microbial diversity in this 10-week study. And they also saw a drop in 19 inflammatory markers. So how do we take this and put this together for people with osteoporosis, people suffering from osteoarthritis, from things that are being influenced by the gut microbiome, and you want to improve your bone health? Well, we know the studies have shown that prebiotics help. So we know that fiber is good for improving calcium absorption, right? And improving the production of short chain fatty acids. And now we know that short chain fat, that fermented foods help increase microbial diversity. Now, of course, we need more studies. We need bigger studies. So this is just the beginning of understanding, but it's really about combining both. I don't think it's a fiber rich versus a fermented foods diet. I really think that they should actually do a study where they have a fiber rich diet, a high fermented foods diet, a fiber and fermented foods diet, and then a control group. I think we need all of those and look at what are the effects of all these different approaches. Because we know from another study that was published last year that when you combine a fiber rich diet, 5 to 8 servings per day, with fermented foods, now in this study, it was 2 to 3 servings per day, what happens is that stress scores drop. So just by eating fiber and fermented foods, your stress levels are going to drop. Now, what is that telling me? That it's having immune effects. It's affecting the body cortisol. It's doing a lot of things. And when cortisol is high, it's also going to affect bone formation as well. Stress is not good for bone health. So it's just really amazing to discover. It's almost like you just opened the door through Alice in Wonderland, and now there's this whole other world that we weren't paying attention to that is affecting so many things in our health. And like you said in the very beginning, when you work on your gut, it's not just about helping your bones. There are so many other things that are going to get better that you may have stopped paying attention to. Maybe you were feeling mentally foggy and you thought that's also part part of getting old, just a par for the course. And you didn't realize that you had yeast overgrowth, and the mycotoxins are affecting your ability to think clearly. And as you fix your gut, things start to improve. So I've been talking for a while, and I'm sure you've got some questions or, just some highlight comments.
Well, no, I love this. And thank you for doing the deep dive into the bones because this is so important. This is the new research that this diversity is making such a big difference for our bones, our overall health. And it's something, as you said, when people have been on antibiotics, high stress, all these things are reducing the diversity. So my question is, do you recommend people get this evaluated with the stool test? Or do you recommend they just start increasing the diversity or both of these things?
Well, I wanted to make it easy for people by designing a quiz that picks up based on not just gut symptoms, but also based on body-wide symptoms, the degree of severity, because a lot of times when I do testing, it pretty much just confirms what I already suspected based on the person's history. So even just creating a very detailed quiz, like I did, that picks up on a lot of body-wide symptoms and gives you a score, that's pretty much going to tell you where you're at. And stool testing, yes, it's important. And if you need to then, if you start with that and you get to a certain place, but then you feel kind of stuck, then that's the point where maybe you want to go and get some stool testing, look at a whole bunch of biomarkers in the stool, like inflammatory markers, secretory IgA. You want to look at digestive enzyme production, pancreatic elastase. But I think our understanding of how to read the gut microbiome from a stool study and translate that into what is the right thing for people, I think we're still I think there's still a disconnect. And I know there are companies out there that even make custom probiotics based on your stool sample. And I've seen mixed results. Some people did really well with that, and some people don't do as well, which just tells me that the science is still evolving. And it's yeah, I mean, there are a lot of like stool tests now that you can even do directly, as a consumer. You can go out and buy a stool test, and I've watched some of these over time, and their recommendations change because they're changing their recommendations based on pooled data. And as they collect more stools, they might tell you not to eat a certain vegetable, and then a few weeks later, if you log in, they're going to tell you it's okay to eat that vegetable. And look, there can be a lot of contradictions, and so honestly, it can start to get really confusing. And I think we need to come back to even what I tell my patients, like, you're not a test result. You know, your body, it's a whole unique thing. And yes, tests can help point us in the right direction, but you still need to listen to your body because nothing trumps what you're sensing. You are your own best barometer. And the more we can learn to be intuitive about our eating, and I talk about this in the book about becoming um, intuitive before your meal. So before meal intuition, during meal intuition, and after meal intuition. Like before, like just thinking, what is my body craving? Like, what do I really want? What does it need? And sure, some of them might be listening and thinking, well, my body's craving sugar. Well, it could be that your gut is hijacked by yeast and it's telling your brain to eat more sugar. But that oftentimes, when I work with people who have those issues, they actually will use the word hijacked. Like they have a certain level of awareness that this is not normal. Like them, like wanting to eat that much sugar, but becoming really intuitive about, like, are you craving greens right now? Are you craving some fermented foods, whatever it is? And then sitting and really mindfully eating while you're eating and being aware of how the food is sitting in your stomach. And when you get full, like allowing that communication to happen by being present, not eating at your desk while you're working, like stopping and being fully mindful and present while you're eating. And then having that post meal reflection where you're sensing, how did my body feel after this? Did my hands feel a bit creaky? Did my joints get a little achy? Did I feel kind of foggy headed, sleepy after the meal? And take a you know keep a food log with what you eat and what your symptoms are, and start to monitor what are the patterns. Pick up those patterns, and then you're basically becoming your own body whisperer and your own doctor, which we should all be trained how to be our own doctors. And I think that empowers people to know what food choices to make.
I love that about I call it the food mood poop journal. I learned that from Andrea Nakayama, but it's so helpful. I can't get over when I see what people, their food journal and how they feel and their symptoms and when are they pooping and all of that information in addition to being mindful, which we aren't and I was one of the worst. As a physical therapist, you're seeing so many patients, you're shoving the food in, the worst possible thing you can do. And
Yeah.
just not, doing one thing at a time, enjoying your food, savoring it. It's such a good practice, and your
Yeah.
body will tell you, and I'm an ex-sugar addict, so you are hijacked, that. You can't it's more addictive than cocaine, so yes, I couldn't agree with you more about how important that is, and it's interesting because when I've ordered things in terms of, like, gluten tests, and the wheat sumer and things that also show gut permeability and zonulin in every single person. I would say 98% of the people I've ordered these who I've recommended that they had go and get these tests. I don't order them myself. It's shown what you would suspect that
Yeah.
that they do have all those things. So that's wonderful that they can just go to your book and then see your symptoms. Unlike bones, unlike just osteoporosis, which rarely manifests by itself, the gut has some symptoms, whether, as you said, it could be, an eczema. It doesn't have to be a gut symptom, but usually you can find things
Exactly.
so that when you do notice improvements, you will notice it, which is nice because with bone health, you don't actually, there's nothing concrete
No,
you can
you
measure.
might not know until you have a
Yeah,
bone fracture, right?
right, which we
That
don't
will
want
be
to
your
have.
first symptom.
Yeah, or they see a number on the DEXA, so it's very different, but when the gut you can look at and you can see the differences, and it's just so wonderful. So before we leave, is there anything else that you wanna mention? I know you had this trip to Africa. Is there anything that you wanna say from that, changed how you feel about things?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So as I was researching my book, I had the opportunity to go to Africa, Tanzania, and stay with the Hadza, one of the last hunter-gatherers on the planet. They're still living in their traditional ways that they've lived for over 1,000 years. And the reason I was really interested in them is just bringing us back to what I was talking about, the holy grail, microbial diversity. They've done gut microbiome analysis on the Hadza and found that their gut microbiome is incredibly diverse. Now, they're not eating the rainbow. They're just eating what is available to them by hunting and gathering. So small to medium sized animals, they eat birds, they might eat goats and things like that. That's not every day. So they're eating berries, they're eating baobab fruit, they're eating honey that's foraged from the trees, and they're eating tubers that they root vegetables that they dig from the ground, and they're eating them raw. They're not cooking them. And so I was curious, like, how is it that they have such a diverse gut microbiome? Because that is the holy grail. That's what we all should be striving for. And it dawned on me, they're not washing their hands. They're not using hand sanitizers. They are out in the wild. They're getting their hands dirty. Their hands have dirt in them. If they hunt, they might have some blood on their hands. And I'm not saying, hey, go out there and do these things. But I do think that there's something we can learn from them because our Western society has become over sanitized. We're using too many antibacterial soaps have actually been found to cause alterations in the gut microbiome. So you want to avoid those. You don't really need antibacterial soaps. You're just fine washing your hands with regular soap and water. And so, if we're looking for what is the ideal formula for achieving this holy grail that will help then rebalance your whole body, fiber, fermented foods, and time in nature. So get out there, have a garden, like get your hands dirty in the soil. If you have organic soil is best. Or even just go hiking, get out into nature. It lowers your stress levels, which is going to have a positive effect on your gut microbiome. That's actually been proven. And it's a microbiome amplifier, the same way that having pets can be, because pets share their microbiome with you when they're licking your face and they're playing with you. So I think that's a really important added piece of the puzzle that people need to realize. It creates our holistic wellness.
Wow, I just love that, and I believe that so wholeheartedly that it's going to change your life. Well, I can't thank you enough. Before we end, just tell us about so you're gonna get we'll have the link. Do you wanna tell us the link? It'll be in the show notes as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So for your listeners, I have a free gift. It's actually a chapter from my book that gives them an overview of what the book is about. So if you're listening to this and you're still wondering, is this for me? Get the free chapter. It's going to give you exactly what the book is about and give you kind of an overview of why this might be good for you. And I also included the foreword by Dr. Perlmutter and a little bit about my gut healing story. And they can go to gutsmartprotocol.com/gift. So gutsmartprotocol.com/gift. And they'll be able to download a free chapter of my book. And if they want to order the book, if they're listening to this and they're like, this is for me, I know I want this. And they're going to get 5 free bonuses when they pre-order the book before April 4th. They go to gutsmartprotocol.com. And one of those bonuses is actually the GutSMART Quiz. So you can find out what your gut type is before the book comes out. So you know what you're going to have to start working on.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I actually pre-ordered the book and saw all the different all the different wonderful things that the downloads have, really helpful information. And I think that's what I like about your work is that it's doable. It's not just giving you the science, it's giving you practical steps that everybody could put into their life that are going to make such a difference for your bones, for your overall health, and and your happiness, which is so important. And I just, I really love how you take the mind, body, spirit approach into gut healing. And because, as you say, I really believe a happy gut creates happy bones and a happy life. So,
And yeah, happy body, happy mind.
exact.
It's all rooted in the gut.
It's all true. So, is there any last minute thing before we leave? I love that about the hunter gatherers, and using that wisdom can and bring those messages and lessons into our life is so impactful.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for having me on and allowing me to share this message with your listeners. And I think there's a lot of practical tips that we gave that they could, start thinking about things they can change. Even just getting out in nature to lower your stress levels, like changing little stepwise activations is what I call them, making small but powerful changes in your daily habits can have a big impact on your health.
So true, because overwhelm is our enemy, and I've seen this work for so many years. When you take one step, then the next step, it becomes doable and sustainable, and it just becomes a new lifestyle that's so much richer and just, it just really changes the quality of your life. So I can't thank you enough for all the work you've done, and thank you for really putting all the effort into researching about bones and the gut. And this book is just going to help so many people. So thank you for everything that you've done and for sharing it with all of us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Dr. Pedre. And now some action steps you can put into your life that will help your gut, your bones, your overall health, and even your happiness. And now you understand why I call this episode Happy Gut, Happy Bones. All the links that Dr. Pedre talked about will be in the show note. And the chapter that he's giving us is really terrific, as well as all the bonuses before his book comes out. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.